Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TF podcast, where we discuss technology, finance, and how that usually relates with Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and sometimes blockchain. My name is Jonathan G. Blanco. I'm really excited for this next conversation. I'm with Nick Soman. We've crossed paths almost a few times, and so it's good to kind of finally be here on here with him. We tried to connect in person and just couldn't get to it. Now that we're staying at home, it's a little bit easier for both of us. So welcome to the show. And with that, I'd love if you could introduce yourself real quick.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Nick Soman. I'm happy to be here with you. We have been trying to do this, and it feels like the fact that we won't let COVID keep us apart, I feel like this is, it bodes well for this burgeoning relationship.
Totally.
I'm Nick. I'm the CEO and the founder of a company called Decent.com. We are making health insurance more affordable for self-employed people and their families. And before all that, I've sort of been a serial entrepreneur going all the way back to being a product manager at Amazon. And it looks like you have some serious PM chops in your back pocket as well.
Yeah. I've been a product person pretty much my whole adult career. Actually, it's been an interesting way, I think, to look at just the space in general. I think for me, the biggest part I love about product management is the way it teaches you how to break down problems and kind of like formulate your idea, right? And so, and then also make sure that you're coming at it from like the customer viewpoint, right? Making sure that you're just customer obsessed. That it's probably things you've learned at Amazon too, right? That customer obsession makes such a difference from the product front.
I think it's really exciting to talk to you about this. Product people I know tend to care about kind of a deep pain, and health insurance is just painful as hell. That's the lightest swear you'll hear from me. I'll try to not be too sailorish on your podcast, but the other thing is product people think about prioritization and trying to find the right tool to solve the problem. And it's interesting. You and I are both product people with a strong interest in blockchain. I'm excited at some point in the podcast to talk a little bit about your views on blockchain, how they've evolved, what you think is going to happen in the future.
Definitely.
All throughout sort of a statement I don't think many would disagree with, which is obviously, there's a way to look at blockchain that you may believe in the core tenets and the core technology, but to this point, it has not found that use case where it's clearly the best solution for the job, whether that's a regulatory issue or a use case issue, et cetera. But we think we found some interesting ways to make use of it in the long term at Decent, where it can really help solve some of what's broken with health insurance. And so I'll be happy to talk to you about that as well.
Nice. Awesome. Well, before we get into the Decent path, I'd love, if you give us a quick little rundown of your background. So you said you spent quite a bit of time in product. I know you founded other companies as well.
That's right. I'll give you the quick rundown. I actually grew up in Seattle area, like you, and lived in Montlake and then over on Bainbridge Island. Actually, shout out to Bainbridge. I'm over here right now. Parents
no
are
way.
a little bit older, and I'm taking care of them.
Yeah, I actually grew up in a small town called Kingston. That's right on the ferry side as well. Yeah, and had friends in Bainbridge.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we played soccer and all that. So I'm over here, and I spent some time in consulting after school, and then went to business school. I ended up getting a paralytic illness in my second year of business school called Guillain-Barré syndrome. Guillain-Barré, it strips the sheaths around your nerves so they can't take signals from your brain. So I was fully paralyzed, and it's one of those things. I'm sure you've had sort of those, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans type moments. I had all these plans. I was going to come back to California and start companies, and that's what I was going to do. And I just got sidewinded by this paralytic illness, and I couldn't walk, and I was in intensive care and then a rehab facility. And at the time that all my classmates in business school were interviewing, I couldn't walk. And so I had taken a summer back in Seattle at Amazon and had a great time as a product manager on Kindle. And then they called and they offered me a job, and I literally had no ability to walk around or talk to anyone else. So they sort of had me as a captive audience. Although I will say I could only sort of talk, and I feel bad for this recruiter because she called and she said, "Hey, we want to offer you a job." And I was like, "Great." I think she really knew what she was getting into talking to a paralyzed guy. But then she said, "We want to put you on supply chain." And I just sort of went quiet for about 45 seconds because I was thinking about how to handle this situation. I didn't want to work on supply chain.
Well, hopefully it didn't have that.
I don't have a lot of energy at this point. I can sort of barely stay awake for 20 minutes at a time. So I was just playing the odds in my head, and I was like, I want Kindle. I want Kindle. And I don't think anybody had ever negotiated in that way before. I was just like, no, I will not accept the job that you're offering me. I want a different job. And she
Yeah.
sort of was like, huh? And I repeated myself a few times. They ended up calling me back and making me an offer to join the Kindle team, which may have just been not wanting to say no to a paralyzed guy. But in any case, I got to come back and work on the Kindle team for a year. I left that job and started my first company. I was part of the Techstars program in Seattle, which it sounds like we have a bunch of common friends from over there.
Yeah.
Scaled and sold that company. I had to figure out how to do growth stuff because, as you know, if you're doing anything with consumer ties in Seattle,
Yeah.
people want to see traction. And so I had to figure out how to scale that to millions of users, and did that with a few different products. Sold the last one to Napster and then worked there for a year. Shout out to Napster and Rhapsody. Still love some of the folks over there. And then came down and built the growth team at Gusto, which sells payroll and health insurance and HR tech to small businesses.
Yeah.
And left there to start Decent. And I had started to understand the pain of health insurance, but it hit really hard because I was suddenly paying more for health insurance than for rent for my family in the Bay Area, and just started getting kind of fixated on the problem, and have been working to try to solve it for a couple of years now.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet. That's crazy. I didn't know that story, that you were paralyzed for a while. That's gnarly. And is that just because I'm curious, is that something that just is this over time? Do people normally recover from that? Is that what,
A lot of people do. A lot of people don't recover all the way, and I've been lucky that I have. They don't really understand it well. They think there may be some connection to polio, and my mother had polio, so there may be a relationship there, but it's not really well understood. But the thing I'll tell you that's, it's a goofy thing to say. I'm happy it happened. I'm happy it happened, and it's because it made me a little more thoughtful. I think I was kind of careening towards, startups or bust, and I still ended up there, but it was kind of maybe with more motives around ego and money and things like that. And it really just stopped me in my tracks, literally, and I had nothing to do but think about, well, gosh, as much as I don't like to admit it, I'm going to die, and I have limited time here, and like how I want to use it. And so it feels like I probably course corrected into something that, to me at least, is more interesting. I'm excited to get up and work on this problem. I'll ask you, I'll kind of return it to you. Have you ever had something that, from the outside, it might look like a tragedy, but it also allowed you to rethink some things?
Oh yeah, man, totally. It's interesting the way your viewpoint changes. Nothing compared to that, but I herniated like 2 discs in my back in college as well. Had to be in bed, and I actually made the mistake. I thought that you were supposed to lay down like when you like had spasms, and like you're basically not supposed to. And so it just completely messed me up. And so anyways, I herniated the space between L4 and L5. And couldn't walk for a couple of days. Like had to the only thing that finally worked was when I laid down for a week straight, essentially, and like on these medications, and had to like kind of like teach myself how to walk really fast. But nothing compared to what you had. But like, no, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because it's I think as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and when you have those sort of things happen to you, and then like or things that happened to you as a kid. Like actually one of the things I really like to do whenever I'm like meeting founders is like, like tell me about a time that you've experienced adversity, right? And how did you get out of that?
Yeah.
And like that's some obvious adversity, right? So like for you, anything that could happen to your startup is not going to be anything close to that.
I love
right?
that point. Yeah, and you said something I actually want to push back on me. You said, "Oh, it's nothing compared to this. It's nothing compared to that." Like, pain is relative, right? Like,
no, it's very true.
You're gonna feel it the way you feel it, and there are people that have gone through things that are objectively way worse than what I dealt with. But I love that point that you made. You almost, it's not sexy, right?
Yeah.
But it's I'm still here,
Totally.
and it's this kind of like, okay, I got through that. And I remember early on in, my startup career, I would meet with some of these kind of grizzled, well, Ben Hu's going to kick my ass if he hears that I called him grizzled on the podcast, but these folks that have been around for a while in Seattle, and these accomplished, there we go, entrepreneurs. And, they would say things like, yeah, I've been through a lot. And I thought that was an ego thing, and I was so cool. And, you've been through this, you've been through that, you've been through the other. As I started to cross that chasm a little bit, you start to feel a little bit like a zombie. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that like a zombie that, you know, you could shoot my arm off, you could shoot me in the leg, and I'm just going to keep walking. And it doesn't necessarily
No,
mean,
I
you know,
totally know what you mean.
it's not a ego thing and it's not a hero thing, but like, I don't know if that what just does not kill you always makes you stronger, but it allows you to realize you can survive a lot. And I think that's the same thing.
So this is gonna sound kind of funny, and then we can get more into decent. But like,
Yeah,
you know, like I remember growing up as a kid. You know, times were tough, and my family they immigrated to the U.S. From Venezuela, and like actually, I feel very fortunate. So I'm the only person in my entire family born in the United States. Everybody else before or after me was born in Venezuela. I don't know if you know what's going on in Venezuela right now, but
I have a sense.
it's terrible. And so like my life would just be frankly totally different. So I've always, you know, been very thankful just for winning the lottery and being born in the United States. I know some people might disagree or whatever, but like for me, I already think like I already won the lottery there. So that's that.
I agree with you, but you know the funny thing is, look, you and I are patriotic, but patriotism used to mean a very different thing. For me, it's about, look, there's a lot that's here to uphold. It's not about following some particular leader, and I won't make it political, but
sure. Well, that's exactly it. It's like, I was actually had someone on the podcast. His name's Alex Gladstein like last week. And, you know, he's talking about like, you know, at the bare minimum here, like we might disagree with our political leaders or we might disagree, but we even have the ability to disagree, right? Like we're not going to be like we're not going to disappear. You know, we're not going to lose our jobs, you know, for those sort of things. But where I was going with all that was, you know, there's definitely been times like, you know, with running my company and running my business where I've been very, very stressed out or like trying to get a deal or it's not going to work out or this or that. And I have like this, I don't want to, you know, I'm going to freak people out. Like, you know, you get like this like chest pain or like this anxiety pain. And I'm like, shit, I remember having that when I was a kid. And I know this sounds really weird. Like I remember like, cause like, you know, when I was a kid, things were sometimes stressful with like, you know, family stuff and whatever. And what's funny is that I don't know if it's because of that as a kid. Now, when I have that feeling, it doesn't make me nervous. It doesn't make me scared. I can tolerate risk in a way that most people cannot. And I look at it as my superpower. Like my superpower is that I'm able to tolerate risk at a level that most people can't. And I'm willing to push the boundaries to a level which most people can't, because there's things that I've already experienced in my life that to me, like maybe comparatively to someone else that we were talking about, might not seem like a big deal, but to me were impactful enough that I was like, it's not going to be any worse than this, you know, most likely.
Oh my gosh, I can connect with that. Yes.
You know, I've said this before with a couple folks, like, you know, I have aspirations one day. I think it'd be really interesting to create, you know, some level of a fund and work with companies, but more I would want to be like more hands-on as in terms of like, hey, we're helping you build, you know, kind of told you about that studio model. But the question I would ask every single founder that would ever come into this fund is, you know, tell me, like what I said a moment ago, tell me about a time in your life where you experienced adversity and how did you come out of it? And it doesn't have to be professional. It can be personal, it can be anything, right? I know this guy who, he's a really talented engineer, and I'm going to tell him to listen to this. I'm not going to name him by name, but he spent 13 years in a refugee camp in Africa.
Holy shit.
So 13 years in a refugee camp in Africa, and he's over here now, and he's really good engineer. He taught himself a lot of stuff, did classes or whatever, and he's just very smart. And like, there's nothing that he likely will experience, hopefully, that will be more difficult than that, right? And so for him, it's like, man, like, I'm just going to work my ass off. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to hustle. Like, I have this ability, you know? And so I love stories like that. And I think it's two different ways to look at the world, right? You could look at it like, oh yeah, I grew up in this, you know, in this refugee camp, and because of that, I don't have the ability to do these things, or that's my superpower. You know, another quick example, and then I'll give you back the floor. Paul, I'm supposed to be interviewing you.
No, I love it. No, look, we're connecting as human beings. That's what matters most to me.
I know this gentleman also who I can't remember what it's called, but he got bit by an arachnoid, so spider, and it caused him to lose his voice. And as a result of it, when he speaks, sometimes people assume that he's deaf, and he's not deaf. And but this person is very, very passionate about the forestry industry, and he's working on a product that is going to basically help with carbon credits and carbon neutral type stuff. And like, he's just all about it. And so he was kind of explaining to this happened to me, it happened to him. And I was like, man, like, I know like you might feel self-conscious about that, but if I can help you with anything, it's, because he wanted some help, kind of thinking through his company and branding and so
Yeah.
forth. I was like, honestly, I think the best help I could give you is like, that's your superpower. Like the
Yeah.
fact that you speak that way is actually your superpower. And it's not necessarily like that your speech is a superpower. It's that you experience a level of adversity that most people would just recline from, and then just like want to take a step back, and you're actively building a company and you're pitching investors, and it's in the same type of space in general, right? Like where you're like thinking about the environment. Like you're not going to let some spider that bit you, that took your voice away, like get in your way of like solving what your why is, what you're trying to do. And I just love that. I love people that can do that. And I think it's really just a frame of reference of how we think is, you can look at the same thing, and it's like how you really look on that and reflect on that to depend on to really create your world from there.
Well, and everybody's talking about The Last Dance right now, so I have to throw in the obligatory Michael Jordan reference.
Yeah.
A microcosm of that whole line of thinking was he would be criticized, and he could easily have taken the thin-skinned basketball player Kevin Durant style approach of, I need to get on Twitter with a shadow account and talk back to these fans. Are you kidding me, Kevin Durant?
Yeah.
Or he kind of used it as fuel.
Yeah.
For me, if we're going to continue the superhero analogy, like Spider-Man got bitten by a spider, right? Batman's parents got killed, and then he grew up in a hole. Like, you don't get the superpowers without going through the trauma. And the funny thing for me, it's a strange way to put it, but it quiets the mind. I go to some therapy now. It's important to maintain my marriage, etc. And my therapist said something interesting. She said, when you were paralyzed, my read is that your flight response was kill. And so you have a fight response, but you don't really run away. And I think that it quiets the mind, and there's a little bit less fear. You certainly care a lot less about what other people are going to think, because you sort of like, look, I can make this a little bit more poignant. I'm serious. Stop it. I am in the hospital. I've not yet recovered mobile function. My parents are there, and I am shitting in front of my parents, like quite regularly, right? At that time, I would have been a 29-year-old man, and my little sister's there, who's I'm close with, and my friends are coming in to visit, and I'm just like this giant baby, and my parents are watching me, defecate. I need help with everything. I need to be fed.
Yeah.
There's a level of humiliation that you're kind of like, well, all right.
Yeah.
We should talk a little bit about blockchain and work, but I guess, you tapped into something for me too, which is that I love the idea of figuring out the things that, have hit you hard in life, whatever that means to you, and then how can you use that as motivation. And I meant what I said. I feel lucky that I had that forced shift in perspective.
Yeah.
Luckier still, but I survived it without lasting paralysis. But it's it's good.
Yeah. I'm assuming it's obviously influenced the way you've thought about, decent, right? Like even from like the healthcare side of it and
I'll give it to you. And we were talking a little bit before the show. I'm tired of pitching. I have some really exciting news that I'm going to get to announce in a couple weeks or so, because I just pitched my ass off for the last couple months successfully, which means that I don't have to do this for a while. But I'll tell you a little bit of the story of this without it being a shill type thing. There were two inspirations for Decent, and one was that. The first one, and I'll come back to the second one, which is being paralyzed. We talked about patriotism and sort of what patriotism means. And for me, the notion of some geographic commonality, I want to feel like I'm proud to be an American. I want to feel like when I, meet other human beings, I want to improve life for them as well. I would love for my reign of concern to extend across the entire universe, but I'm not smart enough for that to happen. So at the national level, I'd love for a return of what I remember feeling when I was younger, which is just, hey, it's cool to be American. We take care of people. This is a good place.
Yeah.
And FDR, who's a president that was a hero to me, he actually had this political platform that he ran on called the Second Bill of Rights. And the Second Bill of Rights was Americans should have decent homes, and they should have decent jobs, and they should have health care. And he used the word decent a lot. And I remember just seeing that, and something kind of clicked, and I was like, that's right. This, this whole idea of, is healthcare a right or is it a privilege? Like, it's a really good question, but in terms of what we're after, it's not to deliver Cadillac, top tier, the best possible plans for everybody in the world. We want everybody to have a shot at affordable, decent healthcare, and that's what we do. And then the second thing, back to kind of being paralyzed in the hospital, the easiest way to make insurance cheaper is to have it cover less things or cover less sick people. And I just wasn't going to do that. Like that would make me sick to my stomach. I was raised pretty liberal in the Pacific Northwest, but even had that not happened, I'm a capitalist, but I was paralyzed. And I think something helpful that came out of that was I looked at all the different ways we could make insurance more affordable and completely rejected the ways that would involve not serving sick people or just covering less things. In a way, the name and then kind of the backstory, like ties our arms to the mast a little bit. If we're going to do this, we have to do it the right way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd love to bring this all into what's happening in the world today. So, we're in a global pandemic with COVID-19, and there's things like the people are getting stimulus checks and bailouts, and there has been like this big conversation from a political standpoint for the last several years about universal healthcare and things like that. But it seems like the healthcare conversation has actually gone down in this pandemic time, right? And so for some, like, actually, I don't even know, like, how are people covering the cost of these sort of things right now? Like, if they are going to the doctor, I've seen things like saying like a test could cost thousands of dollars. I don't even know if that's true. I'd love if you could kind of just wrangle me in on that, on what's been happening.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about that. And I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson of health insurance in America, because I think this explains a lot of what's going on, and it makes this stuff pretty messed up. So, health insurance was something that was purchased by individuals for most of recorded history in most developed nations. The United States has this really interesting choice that we made back in World War II to tie it to the employers, and it had an economic driver behind it. I'm going to tell you about that choice. So in World War II, there was a wage freeze, and the intention was, hey, we need to make sure that we can get people back to work, and we can't just keep jacking up the wages. And so people started looking at different ways they could attract top tier talent if you couldn't give somebody a higher salary. Mm-hmm. And health benefits were born out of that constraint. And people said, okay, well, we can't increase your salary, Jonathan, but hey, we'll give you, if you ever have to be in the hospital for the first week, we'll cover that in any given year. And then after that, it's kind of on you. And then the next woman came along who was an employer and said, okay, well, you know what? We'll give you 2 weeks. And the next woman came along and said, well, then we'll give you 2.5 weeks. And immediately you had this capitalist driven rush towards, better and better benefits. And then they're more and more expensive to maintain. And now you've got this thing, and this is what's hitting so many Americans hard right now. You have a double whammy of, you just lost your job, and you are buying into this system of insurance where traditionally it's really the employers that have the political power and the economic might in America to try to negotiate for even sort of reasonable rates. You end up kicked out into this individual insurance system where you have to buy it for yourself. I do not know for the life of me why they named the post-employment insurance COBRA, but what happens is you're going to get a letter the month that your employer stops paying for part of your benefits. It bites you like a snake. Like, you're looking at this bill that you hadn't really been thinking about, and all of a sudden it's 2 to 3 times what you remembered paying. Yeah. And it's absolutely awful. And part of what we're doing at Decent is we're saying, look, this whole model's wrong. We should be buying this at the individual level. It shouldn't be tied to employers, especially at a time when people change employers a whole lot. And this may be a kind of not obvious point, but it's one that I think is important. When you think about your health, Jonathan, you're not just thinking about the next 18 months, right? You're thinking about, if you're deciding, you look like a pretty healthy guy, but if you decided you were going to go running you're not stupid. You're not thinking, well, if I go running now, then next week I'm going to be in great shape.
Right.
You're thinking this is a good thing for me to do long term. But the health insurance companies that are sponsoring plans on behalf of employers, they have this interesting constraint that they know you're going to change jobs in America every 18 to 24 months. And so they're not going to pay for anything that would take longer than 18 to 24 months to pay off for you. There might be a great argument to pay you to get a health coach or to be compliant with your, eating regimen or whatever else. But those incentives are so misaligned that the only thing they're going to cover is, if you got a heart attack while you're with us, you got a stroke while you're with us, that'll be covered. There's a whole bunch more going on under the covers that is causing cost escalation in America, including the fact that these health insurance companies, they take a fixed cut of the total cost of care, which was a regulatory thing that came out of what was meant to be good intentions. If I was a health insurance company, and Decent's not, that's important. We're a health insurance startup, but we're not a health insurance company. It's a legal difference. If you gave me $1,000 and I was a health insurance company, I would have to spend $800 on care, or I would have to give it back to you. Your revenue is capped at 20% of the premium dollars you take in. Now, you're pretty smart, and you're going to pretty quickly figure out, okay, if I can only keep 20% of the dollars that I collect, the best way to increase my profit is to raise rates year in and year out. They don't actually save money when they save money when it costs less to take care of you, because they just have to give it back. And I guess we looked at this at Decent and we said, hey, no one, including me, can outrun their own financial incentives. And so what can we do to make it so the people who are actually responsible for the insurance are benefiting alongside you when you're healthy and when costs are sort of under control? And the entire thing we're doing at Decent is helping people band together and do something called self-insure, which sounds like what it is. It's if you and me and 888 of our friends all decided to make one big pool together, we'd be rooting for each other to stay healthy. We'd be rooting for each other to get cost-effective care, because at the end of the day, we'll save money when that happens. And so that's kind of what we do. But I guess back to COVID, here's what we're seeing. So COVID hits Austin, Texas, which was our pilot market. And this all happened, about a month ago or so, where we started to get your first, reported cases. All of a sudden, people are blowing up Decent.com, and they're going, hey, you sell the only comprehensive plans that I can buy year round, because normally I only have 45 days out of the year during something called open enrollment to purchase insurance as an individual.
Which is so
and so our sales have been going. Say it again.
It's silly to me that you have these windows where you can, buy insurance, and otherwise you can't for a year or whatever.
It's all, gosh, so much government regulation falls in this category. It's well-intended and it sells well when you think about it one level deep. But, you go a couple levels deep and it's really rough. What it means is that you have limited economic mobility. You can't really just, start something new. Anyway, what we're trying to do is make it work the way that we think it would work if a bunch of us individuals with no company involved decided to band together and self-insure.
Yeah.
And that's the point of Decent. But we've seen demand spiking, and it's crazy, and it's coming out of fear. Nobody knows if COVID's gonna hit them, gonna hit people that they love. I'm quite frequently at a place where I wish our country would come to the solution that I think is correct. And I'll be very blunt about what that is. I think it's single payer. I think economically that's the model that I believe would push down costs the most. But what we talk about Decent is I don't think our government's going to do that. And so we'll do our best to build it on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always, I don't know very much about the healthcare industry, nor health insurance industry, but it always just felt like it's an industry that shouldn't operate the same way as a Wall Street company, right? In the sense of it feels like it would it would be better run as a nonprofit or something like that. But it's interesting.
I really agree. And actually, to bridge into the blockchain stuff a little bit, I mean, this is where I hope we'll be able to sustain this commitment to you when the regulators will allow us to. There's always going to be profit motive in any capitalist form of business.
Sure.
I think transparency is a fair goal. I think transparency, I worked for a while with a big biotech company in South San Francisco. I was consulting, so I can't tell you their name rhymed with Menentech. But every year they would bring in people and say, look, you want to audit our books. take a look, and you can see our margins and you can see our R&D spend. And that's not to say there aren't, gotchas in there. They certainly have talented people across bio and pharma that can move money around in pots. How I think it should work, though, is you ought to be able to take a look and audit the performance of your own pool. And I don't mean that at the individual level. I mean that if we're going to create systems where we're relying on some form of trust for each other, let's open the books. Let's put some sunshine on, where your money's going. And I think over the medium term, we ought to be able to deliver that for people at decent.
So Nick, we're in this time of COVID, and there's obviously lots of expenses that are happening, over time. Thankfully we have these amazing doctors who are, working their tails off. But, ultimately it seems as though costs are going to get more expensive, or if not for covering costs that aren't being covered currently, are premiums going to go up? Is it going to be more difficult to get health insurance now as a result of this?
It's such a good question.
Yeah.
Unless something changes in the current system, Jonathan, it is going to get more expensive next year to have health insurance. And that could happen in 3 different ways, all of which are likely to increase costs to you. One way that it could happen is you're already seeing some whispers in the health insurance community of a bailout for insurers, right? There's this notion that COVID's going to cost a whole bunch of money. Maybe the government can bail out the insurers. And as you and I both know, that will end up getting passed on to the taxpayer to the extent that goes that way. The other thing that could happen is, the insurers right now, some of them are really taking a hit. COVID, is expensive to treat, and there's a lot of people that are dealing with this horrible pandemic that's happening. And there's a real good chance that the insurers are going to be hit pretty hard by those costs and are going to have to up their rates next year. And not to turn this into a pitch on Decent at all, but one of the things that we're happy about the Decent model is that we take a real focus on primary care, and people get more primary care, which keeps them healthier and creates less downstream issues. So we think that won't be as big of an issue for us. But the other thing, and it's a little harder to talk about, there's a whole lot of things that are getting cheaper, or at least that insurance companies are spending less money on too. So elective surgery is a huge, huge contributor to health insurance costs. And elective surgery is what it sounds like. It's surgery, often very expensive, but it's not an emergency. It's a decision or an election to go get it. And what's happening, if you look at the books of these health insurance companies, many, many fewer elective surgeries are being done. And so there's a lot of carriers that are actually saving money in aggregate because COVID is still something people are really worried about, but they're actually saving a lot of money on the lack of these elective surgeries. And, I think that's what's really tough. And that's why I kind of come back to the importance of transparency in this system is these carriers have people who are exceptionally good at making the books look the way that they kind of want them to in order to maximize their economic profit motive. You're going to end up paying more for health insurance almost regardless of the impact of COVID on actual bottom lines at carriers. And I just don't think that's how it should be.
Yeah. So shifting to the blockchain side of things, I know, kind of one of your, call it original visions, or at least, points of view is like, hey, like how can we incorporate blockchain into what you're doing? Yeah. I definitely want to understand that part. For me, I've always had, and again, I don't understand the healthcare industry. I've never worked in healthcare. I've never worked in healthcare, insurance, so I know nothing about it. So you're talking from a layman's, but someone that doesn't understand blockchain. I've always had trouble understanding how, why like the insurance industry from a company standpoint, and you made that distinction, right? You guys are a health insurance startup, not a company, is, it's been hard for me to understand like why they would even want blockchain. And what I mean by that is like, if they kind of benefit from having information, or I call it control of information, and then like billing, and it seems like when you have a surgery, or you have anything, you get 20 different bills from 20 different people, and anyways, long story short is that it's hard for me to see the business case as to why they would want to make that more transparent if they make money elsewhere. I don't know what your thoughts are on.
You're really right about that. And largely, they don't want blockchain because of transparency.
Right.
In fact, many different stakeholders in healthcare, insurers, hospital systems as well, actually benefit significantly by doing 2 things. One, making it so prices and even quality are not transparent.
Right.
And 2, making it so data cannot easily be transferred between systems. There's a tremendous amount of value that's
Exactly.
locked up in these HMO systems or in these hospital systems. And that's why so many attempts at an electronic medical record failed, is that you've got the moneyed interests that are actually actively more interested in many cases in preventing patients and patient data from leaving the system than in helping people get the most cost-effective care.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of that, the administrative savings from putting a bunch of things that have historically required a bunch of sort of low-level manual work into smart contracts, I think is very real. And
Yeah.
we are seeing more people focus on that. And then things are sort of starting to change. You know, there's a moral arc of the universe, I think, in healthcare too. The government has been talking about replacing what's called fee-for-service structures, where you're getting paid every time somebody does something, with what's called value-based structures, where you're getting paid based on the value of the care that you provide and keeping people healthy. And CMS just announced some very big changes that over the next few years will ultimately get providers and at some point insurance companies paid more on the basis of the value that's been created than just on the procedures and the services rendered. And so I think those things are going in the right direction. Now, for us at Decent, a thing that's pretty unique is that we make most of our money by saving members money, by helping them find more cost-effective care options. That's literally where the majority of our revenue comes from.
Nice.
We have some estimate of how much it's going to cost us to serve our pool of customers. And if we can help them get more cost-effective care so they stay healthier and they beat that estimate, then we get to keep part of the savings.
Yeah.
And so that's how we align these incentives. In that world, we have every incentive to show price and quality data. And I guess one thing that is really important when you think about healthcare and transparency, it's not just price. Because the problem is, if you just think about price, I don't want a bargain basement heart surgery, right? But
I always think it's hilarious when you see those LASIK eye surgery commercials, and it's like,
oh, yeah.
get one eye LASIK, and the second one free. It's like,
yeah, and it's how about I spend a little money and not get my eye shot out? I think the interesting thing though is if you a lot of this is related to this short-termism by health insurance companies that expect to only have you for 18 to 24 months, because as we talked about earlier, you're going to change jobs. And so they're not going to be serving you anymore. If you expected to keep people long-term, all of a sudden you're thinking about price in a different way. You're thinking about, how can I get Jonathan the care that he needs that's also of high enough quality that he's not going to show up a year or 2 years later and need that LASIK again, just to use the LASIK example. And so, the longer we can care for people, the better a job I think we can do. The other thing about blockchain that I think is just fascinating, and you and I should probably talk about this, I guess I'll share my own nerdy story. I got into blockchain in 2011, and a friend of mine named Jason King, who'd been in the space for a long time, I won't go into a lot of detail, but he owed me a little bit of money, and he ended up paying me in Bitcoin. And I remember thinking, like, I would really rather have cash, but I guess I'll take these magic beans. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't understand. And he wrote me a nice note. I was like, okay. And I just forgot about it for a while. And it started to spark up, and I thought, well, this is interesting, but ultimately I'm not very driven by money. And so I just thought, this is cool, but if it's just a speculative investment vehicle, not that interesting. I kind of got real interested when I realized that the lack of transparency and the lack of trust among carriers and insurers, and people hate insurance companies, man.
Yeah.
They hate them worse than anything in this country except Comcast from a net promoter score perspective. It's really bad. And so I remember back.
I love that you said Comcast.
And everybody else had these super cool visions, and they were talking about, crypto kitties was a really big thing, and all of a sudden you can breed cats on the blockchain. And I'm not taking anything away from these ideas.
Yeah.
Prediction markets were huge. Augur was going to be the next Facebook. And honestly, I love sci-fi. Like, I read that stuff growing up, and I thought, like, this is the cool stuff. I wish I could work on something that's cool. Unfortunately, I'm just going to have to work on, like, some lame back office stuff of moving money around in low trust environments. And I remember trying to pitch to VCs, and they were like, say something about, like, new behaviors. Like, Andreessen gave me a hard time because they're like, we believe in things for the crypto native of behaviors that have never existed before in the world. And I'd worked at Amazon at that point, and I was kind of like, good luck with that. Like, some of those will hit, for other ones, it's going to be about cost and convenience and quality, just like it is in other contexts. But we raised some money. We were talking about very, very boring aspects of blockchain then. And then, I came back, and pretty soon we'll be able to announce some exciting success in raising some more money. Now blockchain's not in vogue anymore. We're still talking about the same, we've been building some stuff on the Ethereum blockchain that It moves money around in low trust environments. We are about to roll out in the coming months sort of a system of rewards where we can reward members, and ultimately that will be likely to be a token-based system when the regulators will kind of allow us to do that the right way. Our view hasn't changed, but now these same investors that were like, can't you do something weirder, and can't you send rabbits into space? They're like, yeah, don't talk about it at all now. Like now we've moved on. It's all about no code or whatever else. And so we're just kind of quietly building this boring stuff. And it sort of works.
Yeah.
The early days at Decent, what you're going to see is you're going to see some rewards that go to people who make cost-effective care choices. And I'm excited about that. I think after that, doing more with transparency is really exciting. But the last piece, and I'd love to hear your take on this, I think part of the ultimate promise, but also the near-term disappointment of so many crypto projects is nobody wants to say it in this way, but people are trying to build their own economies. That is what a lot of these more ambitious projects are trying to do. We're absolutely trying to do that at Decent because the economy at healthcare is so broken. And when I mean build your own economy, I want to make you a stakeholder in the same economy as me. And so when I have to explain to my mother, what we're talking about with these tokens and this wackadoo stuff, I say, okay, who provides your health insurance? And I guess I'll ask you this. Do you have health insurance right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Aetna.
Okay, so I want you to imagine that Aetna sent you an email tomorrow, and it was, Jonathan, we're making 2 changes to our model. Number 1, we are open sourcing all of our pricing quality data across all of our provider networks. We have it, we use it, you can see it, you can use it. And number 2, when you make a cost-effective care choice, we're gonna reward you, not in cash, but in just a little bit of stock in Aetna. So every time you do it, you're gonna get a little bit of stock in Aetna. That's ultimately the Decent dream is, in the future, I want you thinking about being part of this health insurance pool the way that other people would talk about being part of the Bitcoin community, where everybody's rooting for each other and economically incentivized to make smart choices to drive sort of the adoption of the system. And that's not too weird, man. My parents ran a cooperative, actually group health cooperative up in the Seattle area where we both grew up. Dad would retire as the chief medical executive of a 650,000 member HMO, and they were a cooperative, and they saw what so many people have seen, which is when you give people shared ownership in something and you give them some visibility and transparency into your operations, like you get better outcomes. That's what we're after in the long term at Decent.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I find that super interesting. So like, for me personally, kind of like how you, well, actually real quick before we get to that point. So it sounds like you were saying when you're kind of pitching for your first round, blockchain was very much a part of the narrative. And now in your most recent round, like it was more like an afterthought, but you're probably messaging it in similar ways. You just weren't like promoting it as a blockchain.
It's funny. It's our level of interest in it and our excitement about the long-term potential of technology, literally zero change. I continue to think this is very, very interesting. It's very exciting. It's clear to me why some of the near-term attempts have not yielded a massive use case. And a lot of that to me is because people are trying to build communities, and obviously regulators have to be on board with that for it to work as well.
Right.
But, people used to talk about this as, the best thing since sliced bread. And I remember boring the hell out of VCs by being like, yeah, it might be. And like, by the way, like, I'm pretty sure you could save 5% on your SG&A costs if you move some of this stuff to a smart contract. And they're like, get off the stage, you loser. And then this time, I go out and I want to raise money. And
Uh-oh.
you actually solve real problems with programmable money or not.
Hey, Nick, it cut down there for a second. So you said people were saying like, get off the stage, loser. and then what happened?
That's been pretty much it. No, it was 2 different flavors of the same thing. First, it was
that sounds like my house.
Yeah, right. It was first our ideas weren't outlandish enough, and everybody was enamored of new crypto protocols and crypto natives. And I got to remember this word that Andreessen gave me. It was a beautiful one. I don't know. It's behavior with no corollary in current behavior, which I was like, that sounds like a crazy wild ass bet, but all right. Oh, non-skeuomorphic. There we go. Boom. Non-skeuomorphic behaviors. That's what they were looking for. We
Nice.
didn't have that. And this time, everybody is interested in healthcare all of a sudden. But I say the B word and I say blockchain, and they're kind of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That we thought that was cool, but didn't those cats never actually got to Mars?
Right.
And just kind of, I want to ask you this because you're deep in this space. I guess let me ask you a hard one. What's been the hardest thing to accept with the rises and the falls of the market for you?
So I think for me, when it comes to, and this has obviously been an evolution of thought, but, I've, I've become way more bullish on Bitcoin than I ever thought I would. And it's not that I wasn't bullish before. It's more that like, I kind of had this mentality before of like, Bitcoin and other things. Right. And now when I think of things from like a currency perspective, or from a money perspective, like for me, it's all Bitcoin and nothing else. Like I don't care about any other token, because of the fact that I think that having a secondary market to a token is slightly problematic, especially when the token is based on utility. And this is me putting on the hat of a product manager.
Sure.
So I think there's need for in-network tokens. Don't get me wrong. I'm super bullish on in-network tokens, because actually what you were kind of saying to me makes a ton of sense, in that you have a reward and a loyalty element of the system. So I spent years, actually, like I think I told you, I can't remember if I said this while we were recording or not, but I've spent years working in retail technology, everything from brick and mortar to platform to e-com to big box. And actually, I spent time working on a loyalty platform with tokenization. And in an in-network context, I really feel like those things make sense. I actually am a fan of Libra, and probably get people mad at me for saying that. And it's not that I'm a fan of Libra as in like I want to use it as a consumer. Like I wouldn't use Libra personally, but as we talked about when we first started this recording, is I'm a product manager. So if I'm a product manager and I'm thinking about Facebook and they want to keep people inside of their network, and then if I'm a product manager and I'm thinking about the community and they do so many actions within the network, and they do things like Messenger, or they do things like watch videos, to me as a product manager, it's natural to start thinking about like what might an in-network token look like inside of the Facebook ecosystem. Right. And I think that they made a massive mistake, for example, in like being so grandiose in what they were saying by saying things like, oh, like, yeah, like it's gonna be this basket of currencies and it'll help, people in less developed countries, and like people can use this outside of the ecosystem. It was just too big. All they had to say, literally, from a product manager perspective, is like, yo, we love our users so much, we want to reward them for doing things. And so we're going to give them in-network currency that they can use to, like, I don't know, tip their friends when they watch a video, or like to send their mom like some cash real quick, to buy groceries and whatever. Right. And so like, that's where I think things like that make sense. And so, with what you're saying and like how you're thinking about it, I think you're going at about the right way. And that you're saying like, oh yeah, we're going to have some level of in-network reward. And that's super common, actually, that kind of stuff happens in traditional, that's starting to happen, I should say, in traditional, what do you call it? Health insurance premiums and things like that. And so I think there's something there, but
where I'll agree with what you said, the dollar gets a bad rap, and I'm not here to talk about the wonders of fiat currency and the dollar.
Yeah.
We may be looking at a world where, Bitcoin is universal reserve currency, and then network tokens are either a simple reward that stays in network and keeps people in network, totally possible, a little bit like airline points, or they're the new stock. At Decent, we do talk about that. It's really about shared ownership. That's the part that excites me. And if there can be, secondary speculation on that ownership in the future, I can see ways that would be appealing for all the different stakeholders. But we're not trying to be a world currency. Like I think the minute that I'm worried about what's happening in Korean crypto markets, because it's impacting the users of our health insurance,
it's crazy. It doesn't even make sense.
Right? I have so many dear friends that were actually running pretty legitimate crypto startups, and a good buddy of mine, CEO of a company, I can't name him unfortunately, but he said, man, I'm basically the CEO of two companies right now. I'm the CEO of my actual real usage company that serves an existing use case that's related to games. And then I'm the CEO of this other company that's trying to keep a token price up. And
Right.
there's literally no correlation between the activities of CEO one and CEO two.
Exactly. You legit have to market make in order to create like the liquidity opportunities for your, it doesn't make sense from a business context. And that's just frankly kind of been, again, my evolution of thinking overall. And so like, while like, I think, Ethereum might be very interesting from like a tech play, sure, they haven't figured out everything that they want to do just yet, or like it hasn't, I guess, got the, it's not at the level where everybody wants it to be. Let's just say that. But like, I think it can be, like, don't get me wrong. It's just not there yet. Right. And so, the fact that there's like this fluctuating, cryptocurrency, like on the side, it just, in a utility context, to me, it feels weird. And so, that's why I do actually like the idea of stable currencies, right, and stable tokens. But again, I'm just going back from that point of view of, because it's in network. And mind you, when I say all these things, all these things, because I think they work from a business context for their business use case. Is it decentralized? Maybe it's only decentralized enough for their network, and like, what level. All those reasons, though, is why I continue personally to be so bullish on Bitcoin,
Yep.
right? Because it's like that hedge across your sovereign financial behavior that you can have across from like the traditional fiat system, and then also in these native in-network, currencies or in-network scenarios. So
I love it. And there's a corollary actually with healthcare. So a few folks warned me when I came into healthcare from sort of a deep background in consumer and leading the growth team at Gusto and all that stuff. This is a weird industry to get started. Like, it's a very, very strange industry when you're trying to go from 0 to 1, because you sort of have two bad options. You can either build a point solution and try to go after these, insurance companies or these big hospital systems that have buku money, but you just have to form a line out the door if you want to sell them a new wellness program or a new
right.
solution for cardio monitoring. Or you build a full stack solution, which you have to be a little bit of a crazy idiot to do. And you also, to kind of acknowledge privilege, have to be able to raise some money. You have to be able to, tell a compelling story. And even then, it's like there's no version of healthcare where you can transform the system in a meaningful way with, two women in a Berkeley PhD program who just decided to spin up a website on a weekend. Like that's very, very hard to do. I think it's the same thing. Is that so many things look good on a slide deck, but Bitcoin has survived so many ups and downs that I continue to think it's certainly going to have a place at the table, if not the prime position.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And like, and again, like just because I'm very, when I think of, to go back to the blockchain context, it's more, I kind of like to rank it like this. I say like, okay, there, for me, there's Bitcoin, the blockchain that doesn't exist yet, and then everything else. And like, and then on those everything else, like they might very well become the blockchain that doesn't exist yet, right? Perhaps that's Ethereum, or perhaps it's, something IBM's doing, because who are all like, very intelligent people doing great things. Like, I'm not trying to minimize anything that they're doing.
No, but when you're in the middle of the Cambrian explosion, like most things are going to end up being a ruined and a fake, a spoiled experiment. Like,
sure, exactly. Like I've been a part of failed startups, and I've seen failed companies, right? And so, and you see it, as a spectator as well. So, I think someone will figure it out. I'm definitely supportive, and I think someone will figure it out over time. In the coming years.
We talked a little bit about Facebook, and I just, as a quick aside, kind of, it was really disheartening for me to work really hard in the Facebook app ecosystem and work to build a bunch of new ways that human beings can interact with each other using that API. And then realize that at the best case scenario, I was doing R&D for Facebook to unearth new user behaviors that they could then monetize.
Oh, yeah.
And it's super different from what I'm working on now. I'm going to be a real nerd and share a favorite quote from a poet with you. There's a poet called Rainier Maria Rilke, and Rilke said, "The purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things."
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we're working on this at Decent, the insurance body is the second largest lobbying body in America, and the number one is pharma, typically. And so in different ways, we're up against some very powerful players, but I really like that this is fundamentally technical and execution risk. That's not to say that I know it's going to work, but it feels worlds different from trying out a bunch of different mechanics and hoping you can find something people like. People will tell us to our faces, sometimes in an insulting way, "Hey, I want more affordable health insurance." Sometimes it's, "Thanks for making it a little more affordable." Oftentimes it's, "You think that's affordable, you joker? This isn't even close. You need to do what much better." And what's nice about it, though, is there's no question about, do people want what we're trying to deliver? It's, can we deliver?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. When you're talking about like the app ecosystem, it made me think of Brave and like the Brave browser. So
Yeah.
I think, from a tech perspective, I really like what they're doing. I think that it's really neat that you can earn Brave tokens, for, being on that browser and so forth. But just going back to what I said, to me, I don't, while I understand why they set it up this way, I don't think that you need to have that be a fluctuating currency, right? Like, if anything, that can be a stable currency or a stable token or a stable point. And I could get more aligned with that. But the second you start adding like this other aspect that then creates, like I said, the secondary market opportunity, it's not natural. So put it this way, like you worked at Amazon, right? And so it's like in Venezuela and Argentina, there's actually a lot of sometimes people will pay each other in Amazon gift cards, right? And the reason they do that is because the Amazon gift card will hold its value longer than than their own money, which is nuts, which is crazy. But like, there's not really like this notion of necessarily there being a secondary market for Amazon gift cards. Sure, I'm sure you could maybe like get a reduction on the dollar, right? So like,
Well,
maybe
no,
if it's
let's talk about why it is happening, because maybe we disagree on this, but I suspect we don't. I'll be really honest. We had a bunch of investors telling us, "Hey, we absolutely want you to do an ICO. We believe your story," which is better than 99% of the stories out there of why you would want to do this. Because for us, it was, do we need $100 million in an ICO? Well, maybe or maybe not, but I can certainly tell you what we would do with it. We would insure more people. There's the need that's great enough that if we can raise 10, we can do something. If we can raise 50, we can do something. If we can raise 100, we can do something else. I think what's hard about projects like Brave for me is, dude invented JavaScript. Like, the dude was not going to struggle to raise venture financing.
Yeah.
And I think everybody got caught up in this sort of heady whirlwind of, hey, we can raise all this money. And then, people are speculating, including dear friends and family members of mine that couldn't afford to put the money in that they were putting. It's really hard to justify that when at the end of the day, you're talking about a browser that I would be hard pressed to see how everybody involved in that was expecting to make a whole lot of money.
Totally. And like I said, I think Brave's dope. Like, from a product perspective, I think it's awesome. Yeah. I think like the product, what it offers,
we think
like,
the project is cool.
Yeah, I really like it. It's just going back to what we've been talking about this whole time. And like, kind of like you said, is like, you have to have essentially like two hats on of, and sure, like technically if you're the one running the company, like, you don't know what's happening in the secondary market. Like that's a whole nother conversation.
I don't even know how I got on here today.
Yeah. So we didn't pay in exchange to put it on there, so it's like, I mean, right. So I just pulled it up real quick. So like, if you would have bought Brave at the ICO, right, you were buying it at, I don't know, I guess the furthest I can go back is like 17 cents or something. And then it went up to, 27. And what's Brave at right now? 18 cents. So it's like, it's a stable currency.
It's an annuity. There you go.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. And I'm not trying. Yeah. No, and I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not trying to pick on them. I think they're just they're a good example because of the fact like that they have such a great product, like all the more reason why I think it should be stable. Whereas like there's other companies that like literally lost 90% or more of their token value, you
Yep.
know, front like, which is just doesn't even make sense. Like those people
It's
need to
also from a product manager standpoint, I would say,
return the money.
well, maybe solve one problem at a time, right?
Yeah.
Like you're taking on whole different categories of problems. Of can you figure out the right things to reward? If you can, make it stable over time as you can connect it to the value of the system in a way that's aligned with regulators. You know, there are ways to introduce this stuff so it's phased.
Yeah.
I don't know, but the funny thing is, like, I complain about this stuff. I absolutely love people that are taking on these weird projects because some of them are definitely going to be successful and they're going
Yeah.
to make my life and the lives of my children better. And in my own way, you know, I talk about this like, oh, it's very rational. You know, we're taking on the health insurance system and trying to replace it with something better. Like, I'm going to sound just like those, you know, deep crypto folks to most folks outside of healthcare. At the end of the day, I guess we're talking about Venezuela and your family's background there. To the extent that you can at least be scratching your own itch or know people who've experienced the problem you're trying to solve, it helps.
Yeah. Oh, totally, totally. But yeah, like again, just to recap on the blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin thing. For me, it's just again like from a crypto, from a sound money perspective, only Bitcoin. From a technology perspective, I think there's a lot of people attempting to do really good things, and I really think that they'll figure it out. You know, it sounds like you're figuring it out. Like I'm super excited to see these people figure it out, and yeah,
But buy
and that
Bitcoin.
yeah, but buy Bitcoin. And
I do.
yeah, if you want to say that your product is utility, then like actually make it utility.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'm excited, and I think when the hype cools, and we're sort of dealing with some version of this with COVID. It's so easy to start a business. It's so easy to embrace the technology when the promise of riches seem to be just around the corner.
yeah,
Um, I have some friends now that are deciding to start businesses into this environment. And Decent was very lucky, right? We were already at kind of the this is really going to happen phase of our fundraise when COVID hit. My
yeah,
friends that are going out now and being like, now is the time I choose to start my startup. I'm paying just a little bit more attention to them because
yeah.
they're crazy enough that like they might beat the odds.
No, oh, totally. I mean, for me, so it's interesting you say that. You know, I feel like you and I could talk for hours, by the way.
I
But
know, but I was trying to figure out like a cool way to just invite you to get a beer with me when we're allowed to do that again. I would
yeah,
really.
but no, so I totally agree. And like, you know, kind of going just to touch to I guess to end on that or touch on that is like, you know, I love seeing the people that are still doing their companies right now and not fundraising, right? Like or like that mode, because you know, like I, you know, there's probably like two types of investors right now. There's you know, any investor that tells you it's business as usual is probably stretching the truth a little bit. But like for the most part, you know, you're probably not going to get new money unless maybe you have like some level of relationship. So like right now is like an excellent time to build relationships, you know, in those long-term capacities. Like, but I can't imagine that there's too many investors writing a check to someone they don't have a prior relationship with, right? Or like in, you know, at any point. And so I kind of think it's like the best time to just really think about what does revenue look like and how do you just get any type of revenue, whatever it is, in a consistent fashion. And it's different. And most of the times when an early stage company is there, it's like they don't necessarily think about that. And so to go along with your point,
Yeah.
you know, I think that like those companies that are starting right now and are focused on revenue, I think will be pretty kick-ass companies if they can figure it out.
Oh, it's good, and it's much harder to become top of mind for the folks that are looking to spend their limited money right now. I mean, I
Yeah.
work in a space that is literally, I'm sad to say it, but you know, our business benefits from what's going on because more people need insurance. But there's still this counterweighting factor of just like the economic insecurity of everybody right now. It means there's no bullshit startups that are raising a ton of money to put something out in the world that might just be cool someday. Like you
Yeah, there
kind of
needs
don't really want it. or else you should just go get a regular job, and maybe that's what I should do, but I like what I'm doing.
It's funny you say that because, yeah, my dad, he every time he sees me, he's like, "So when are you gonna get a job?" I'm like, "Dad, like, Dad, this is my job." He's like, "No, no, no, but like, when are you gonna get like a job?"
You just say, Dad, when are you going to buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, I have been telling him to.
Oh my God.
Well, actually, a last story, and then we can wrap is when Facebook announced Libra, he calls me up, and my dad's like, "Hey, so so Facebook, they did that Bitcoin thing that you tried to do, only better."
Oh man, where do you even start with that? That's amazing.
Yeah. I'm like, thanks, Dad. I was like, well, first, they're not doing Bitcoin. Second, like, yeah, it was funny though.
Man,
Like,
I have a dad story too. This is embarrassing. My dad, he grew up pretty poor, public high school in LA, and um, when I had gotten lucky and gotten given some crypto early, and then I bought just a little bit more, and it started to peak. I'd never been through a bull ride like that before. I did not know what was going to happen. I just, like everybody else listening to this, I was waking up 4 times a night to look at Blockfolio. My thumb got pained out from scrolling that thing up and down. And I remember coming home for the holidays right before everything started to crash. And I was just talking to him, and his advice, it wasn't a ton of money because it never became that, but from where I started to where I was at peak, it looked great. And I just told him about it, and he's like, sell. And I was like, no, are you kidding me? I'm not touching this. This is a gold piece. And he's like, well, sell half. And I was like, it stressed me out too much. But my dad's usually right. And that would have been smart.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, in is it 2021 or Plan B, 100 trillion on Twitter said it's going to be at 228,000 by, like, I think it's 2024 by next halving, or maybe it's either 2024 or 2021. Sorry that I don't know the exact one, but you can follow Plan B and he'll tell you.
Oh no, that's great. I think as long as McAfee is fully loaded, we still haven't reached.
Although he's kind of flipped his script a little bit on it overall.
And honestly, I would flip my script too. That was probably not a bet that ever needed to be made.
No, definitely.
I try to follow my word in pretty much all but that case. Hey, look, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm serious. Let's grab a coffee or a beer, or
let's definitely do it.
I just say beer, and now I have to make room for an equally attractive non-alcoholic beverage. So whatever.
All right, sounds good. Awesome. Well, Nick, actually, I have one last question for you, and it's a question I ask everybody at the end, and that is, what is a question that you want to ask to the audience that they can essentially think about, throughout their day, and in anything? It can be anything about what we've talked about, or just anything overall.
I love it, and I'm going to relate it back to something that you said early on about the challenges of going through adversity and then figuring out how to make it your superpower. So my question to the audience is, this may be the most adverse period that our country or our world is going to go through in your lifetime. There's a possibility of that. And so how are you going to use this crisis? How are you going to take what's going on with COVID and use it to cultivate new skills, or to develop a part of yourself or your vision, so that 5 years from now, you can look back and say, yeah, it was then. It was during the COVID pandemic that I started to unlock my superpower. That's my question to the audience is think about that. And if you want to share any thoughts on that with me, I'm nick@decent.com. I love to hear from people.
Nice. Awesome. I love that question. That's great.
Yeah, man. Well, I stole it from you, so hopefully I still get credit for it, like half. I want 50%.
All right, 50, well, 51.49.
All right. Good.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot, Nick. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Everybody, thank you again for listening to another episode of the TF podcast. Please make sure that you're subscribed on the podcast that you're listening this to, or on our YouTube. And also make sure that you're following us on Twitter. I'm at JG Product, and you can learn more about TF at TF Blockchain. Thanks so much, and we'll see y'all soon.
Bye-bye.